joining the Untold Story with Scott Knuckles. We hope this message will drive you to greater faith, a more lasting hope, and a deeper love for others and yourself. Thomas Edison said, "Many of life's failures are people who did not realize how close they were to success when they gave up." Let's get started with today's podcast.
Welcome to the episode, Are You Swimming in a Kiddie Pool? I got my first-hand lesson on getting out of the kiddie pool, and it is one that I will never forget. It happened when I was about 8 years old. As a kid, summers meant the chance of swimming at Stone Lick Lake in Claremont County, Ohio. One particularly busy summer day, it was packed with people of all ages enjoying the summer fun. Amid the chaos, my eldest brother decided it was time to teach me how to swim. At the time, I refused to venture far from the safety of the shallow water, clinging to the comfort of knowing I could stand if needed. But that day, my brother had other plans. With one arm holding me and the other clutching my older brother, he marched determinedly into the lake. As the water rose higher and higher, the reality of where we were headed began to sink in. The deep end, far beyond the safety of my comfort zone. Each step took what felt like an eternity. I kicked, screamed, and fought with everything I had, desperate to escape his iron grip to no avail. And then it happened. Without warning or preparation, he released me, tossing me into the deep, cold water. The shock hit instantly as I plunged into the unknown, the dark water surrounding me like a heavy blanket. Panic gripped me as fear tightened its hold on my chest. My lungs burned as they began to fill with water in my frantic attempt to gasp for air. I flailed my arms and kicked wildly, trying with all my might to stay afloat. But no matter how hard I fought, I kept sinking. I couldn't feel the bottom, and in that terrifying moment, drowning seemed a real possibility. Just when I thought it was all over, my brother yanked me out and dragged me to the shore. I was relieved, then furious by what had just happened. I remember vowing right then that I would never trust anyone in the water again. Are you swimming in a kiddie pool? It's a vivid metaphor. It speaks of safety, comfort, and predictability. It calls out something deeper, the unwillingness to grow, to risk, to step out into deeper, more uncertain waters. While the swimming story I just shared is true, there's another example from my life that feels even more fitting. Getting out of the kiddie pool became uncomfortably real in the fall of 1986. I had just started my senior year of high school in a quiet little town just north of Cincinnati, Ohio. Life was predictable, but predictability has a way of nurturing fear. What would I do after graduation? How would I succeed? Those questions loomed large and unanswered. One day, my best friend, Mike Huffaker, approached me. He had a plan, or rather, a mission. He wanted to visit the Army recruiter and ask if I would come along for moral support. Sure, I said, I'll go. I had no intention of joining the military. My role was clear in my mind. I was there for him, not for me. As we sat in that recruiter's office, I watched Mike's determination grow. He was resolute, unwavering. The recruiter's eyes turned to me. What about you? Do you want to serve your country? I laughed nervously and shook my head. I'm just here with my friend. As Mike started his steps, filling out forms, taking the aptitude test, the recruiter encouraged me to tag along. Why not? Just take the test. You don't have to commit to anything. And so, one step at a time, I found myself moving down a path I never intended to take. It wasn't what I expected. It was invasive, grueling, and uncomfortably serious. Then came the recruiter's casual suggestion. You might as well get the physical done too. If you ever decide to join, you'll be ready to go. I don't think I realized at the time, but I was standing at a crossroad. It felt like the room had gone silent and time had stopped. This was bigger than just a decision. It was a defining moment, one of those rare junctures where the path you choose will echo through the rest of your life. That day turned into an exhausting all-day ordeal. By the time the physicals were finished, we were brought into a room where the recruiters tried their final pitch. You should sign up. If you don't, you'll never amount to anything. Those words were echoing in my head as I had heard them several times before. The recruiter said, "This is your chance to do something great, to serve your country, to make a difference. If you don't sign up, you will work at a fast food restaurant for the rest of your life." I protested. I haven't even talked to my parents. Call them, they replied. And so I did. I called home and explained everything to my mom. Her response was swift and clear. Scott, don't you dare. Your father served in the military, and so did your brother. Don't sign anything until you've talked to your dad first. I promised her I wouldn't. But the moment I hung up, something shifted in me. The recruiters were still waiting when I walked back into the room. They asked, "So are you ready to sign up? Are you ready to serve your country?" Though I had just told my mom no, I heard myself say, "Yes, I am." It wasn't rebellion. It wasn't logic. It was something deeper, something I couldn't explain then and still struggle to explain now. A nudge, a whisper, a leap. It was my chance to get out of the kiddie pool. 8 months later, I found myself on a plane to Fort Dix, New Jersey for basic training. I had never flown before, never been so far from home. My parents didn't even come to the airport to see me off. They thought it was a phase, that I'd changed my mind, that somehow this wasn't real. Yet it was real, terrifyingly real. This freshly minted high school graduate was on his way to a new life. Upon arrival, I put my newly created ID card under my chin so they could check my ID against the name on my uniform. When they saw that my name was Knuckles, they couldn't believe it. Out of all the names that come and go, they had never seen mine before. It was as if I had a target on my back the moment I stepped on base. I'll never forget the first week of basic training. The cold nights were relentless. Seeping through the open windows in the barracks, the one wool, thin, green blanket didn't help much either. I caught a chest cold that made every breath and every push-up feel like a battle. Little sleep and being physically sick and homesick didn't help me either. The drill sergeants didn't let up in the least. Their mission was to break us, to push us beyond what we thought we could endure, to tear us down only to rebuild us into fighting men and women. One of the earliest memories was at the chow hall. Imagine every type of breakfast food you could dream of. Omelets, pancakes, bacon, cereal, and donuts. My eyes were bigger than my stomach as I piled my tray high. But before I could take more than one bite, a drill sergeant appeared like they so often do. "What do you think this is?" he barked. "A Holiday Inn buffet?" They made an example of me that morning, and I left with an empty stomach and a bruised ego. And sore arms, too. The next day, I thought I would smarten up. I stuffed my cargo pockets with a couple of donuts and a box of cereal. A contingency plan for skipped meals, I thought. But the drill sergeants were always one step ahead. I guess you could say they've seen it all. They lined us up, searched every pocket, and punished the offenders with endless push-ups. Oddly enough, I escaped because they stopped searching when they got to the person directly in front of me. All day long I tried to find a way to eat that contraband, but it seemed like everywhere I went their eyes were glued on me. That escapade kept me from doing it again. Yet through all the grueling physical demands, the emotional challenges proved to be the heaviest burden to bear. The miles we marched each day were accompanied by the rhythmic chants of our drill sergeants, their voices rising above the sound of boots hitting the ground. The cadences were meant to keep us in step, to push us forward, but some of their lyrics had a way of piercing the heart. One cadence haunted my thoughts. Jody's got your girl and gone. Ain't no use in calling home. Ain't no use in feeling blue. Jody's got your girl and you're through. I couldn't help but dwell on those words, wondering if they would become my reality. Would I lose everything I was holding on to back home? The people, the connection, the love, the hope. The fear of that possibility weighed on me more than the heavy packs on my shoulders. Each night as we lined up for mail call, my heart would pound with anticipation. I would silently pray to hear my name, yearning for even the smallest connection to the life I'd left behind. Those letters were more than just ink on paper. They were my anchor, my reassurance that I hadn't been forgotten. I hoped for 2 letters each night, just 2 simple envelopes, yet they held the power to breathe life into my weary soul. One from my parents, grounding me in familiar trappings of home, and one from my girlfriend, Cassandra, a promise that life beyond this grueling march still had joy and belonging for my girlfriend and me. Those letters became my sanctuary, a reminder of why I was enduring the pain and the endless days of uncertainty. They weren't just words, they were my lifeline. At first, her letters came often, each one cutting through the heavy fog of exhaustion. As the weeks passed, they grew sparse, their absence louder than the cadence of boots pounding the earth. My mind racing each day, thinking, what is she doing? Does she still want me? Then one night, the inevitable came. As I opened her letter with shaking hands, the drill sergeant cadence came into mind, and I saw the words I had silently dreaded. A Dear John letter. She had let me go, a distance too far and a future unknown. After all, she was a hometown girl, rooted in familiar places, while I was marching forward into a world neither of us could picture. Her words weren't cruel, but they cut deep, severing the fragile thread of connection I had clung so desperately to. In that moment, surrounded by the noise of others, yet engulfed in a silence that felt deafening, I was consumed by loneliness. What was I doing here? Why had I signed up for this journey that seemed to strip away every piece of who I was and what I knew? I had to press on because the march never stops, the cadence never falters, and the path forward is the only one you can take. The Apostle Peter had to get out of the proverbial kiddie pool too. In a situation that few of us can imagine, Peter is one of the very few to ever walk on water. After Jesus fed the 5,000 and ministered for days on end, the disciples were exhausted. Some might even say frustrated. They wanted a break. And Jesus told them to get into a boat and go to a solitary place. But the people saw them and went to where they were going, and they had to continue ministering. After it was all over, Jesus told the disciples to go on ahead of him. The Sea of Galilee, where Jesus told the disciples to cross, is approximately 13 miles long and 8 miles wide. Most crossings referenced in Scripture would likely have been from one side to the other, spanning about 5 to 6 miles. For fishermen rowing in typical conditions, such a journey could take 2 to 4 hours. However, the estimated time it took the disciples to cross the Sea of Galilee probably took 8 to 10 hours or more due to the challenging weather conditions. No doubt exhausted from rowing against the storm until the middle of the night, the disciples were utterly exhausted and terrified. The air was thick with mist, and the wind whipped across the surface of the Sea of Galilee, sending sharp sprays of water onto the faces of the 12 men rowing against the storm. The boat groaned under the strain of the waves. Every man aboard was a fisherman, familiar with the unpredictability of the water, but tonight felt different. The storm wasn't just fierce, it was relentless, as if the sea itself had turned against them. They had been rowing for hours, and the shore was still far away. And then it happened. At first, Peter thought it was his eyes playing tricks on him because it was 4 a.m, the way exhaustion can blur reality. Then he saw it again, a figure, faint and ghostly, moving across the water. "Do you see that?" he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. The others turned their faces pale with fear. "It's a ghost," their voice trembling as they were scared to death. The storm seemed to grow louder, as if the very elements mocked their terror. Then the figure spoke, and the voice that carried across the waves was calm, steady, and unmistakable. "Take courage. It is I. Do not be afraid." Peter's heart caught in his chest. It was him, Jesus. But how? The figure was walking on the water, not sinking, not floundering, walking, as if the waves were solid ground. Peter's fear mixed with something else, something he couldn't quite name. Awe, wonder, and a question that burned in his soul. Could I do that too? Without thinking, he cupped his hands and shouted above the storm, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you on the water." The answer came quickly, without hesitation. "Come." Peter didn't pause to think. He didn't calculate the risk or wait for the storm to die down. He was ready to get out of the kiddie pool. He simply stood, his legs shaking, and climbed over the side of the boat. The first step was the hardest. His foot hovered above the water, every rational part of his mind screaming that he would sink like a stone. But then it happened. His foot touched the surface and held. Peter took another step, and then another. The water was firm beneath him, like the earth itself, and the wind seemed almost to fade. His eyes locked on Jesus, and for a moment, nothing else existed. Not the storm, not the boat, not the fear that had once gripped him. However, as the waves were crashing under him, his focus wavered. He looked down at the water beneath him and saw it for what it was, deep, dark, and impossibly dangerous. Fear flooded back into his heart like a rising tide, and in that instant, he began to sink. "Lord, save me!" he cried, his voice breaking with desperation. Immediately, a hand shot out, strong and steady, pulling him up from the churning waves. Peter gasped for air as he clung to Jesus, his heart pounding. "You of little faith," Jesus said gently, his eyes full of both love and challenge. "Why did you doubt?" Together they climbed back into the boat, and as soon as they did, the storm ceased. The wind died down. the waves calmed, and an eerie stillness settled over the sea. The other disciples stared in awe. None of them could find words, but they didn't need to. They knew, without a doubt, that the man standing before them wasn't just their teacher or friend. "Truly," they whispered, "you are the Son of God." As Peter sat there gripping and trembling, he didn't feel ashamed. He felt humbled, yes, but also alive in a way he had never experienced before. He had stepped out of the boat. He had walked on water. Even though he had faltered, even though fear had pulled him under, he had learned something that would stay with him forever. When you keep your eyes on Jesus, even the waves obey. Here's what I've learned. The kiddie pool is comfortable, safe, predictable. It's where you float, where nothing challenges you, where you never grow. The ocean, by contrast, is vast, daunting, and full of uncertainty. It's also where the horizon stretches endlessly, where the sun dances on the waves, and where life's greatest adventures begin, and where you can end up in the place of your dreams and find your destiny. I didn't know it then, but signing up to join the Army was my first step out of the kiddie pool. It was my first step into deeper water, into a life of unknowns, filled with risk, but filled with growth and unexpected purpose. So I ask you, are you still swimming in the kiddie pool? Or is it time to step out, take a risk, and trust that God will carry you farther than you ever imagined? No matter how lonely, exhausted, or dark it is, moving forward is the only way. The kiddie pool is a safe bet for sure, but to everyone else, it is limiting and holding us back. We are born to be challenged, stretched, and pushed. The Bible says, "Count it all joy when you face trials of many kinds, because those trials develop patience, endurance, and it ensures that we lack no good thing." Peter sank because he took his eyes off Jesus, but we must remember that he had faith enough to get out of the kiddie pool and walk toward Jesus. He was the only disciple that took that risk. 11 others stayed in that boat in fear. When Peter saw that Jesus could do it, he thought to himself, "Can I do it too? I'm going to ask." We must remember that when we get out of the kiddie pool, storms are going to come to cause us to get back in that boat, get back where we belong, keep us held back, and keep us from reaching our destiny. In closing, there are so many great things we can pull from this story. The first thing we should think about is not being afraid of the storm. When we face trials, God calls us to be strong and courageous. As he told Joshua, who was a mighty conqueror, he said, "Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go." With the word guiding us and the recognition that God will be with us, that should be all we need to move in uncharted territory. Secondly, who asked the disciples to get into the boat in the first place? It was Jesus. And this is a truth we must remember. Sometimes Jesus will ask us to go through the storm. He's not surprised by it. In fact, he may even be the author of it. Why? Because he is working in our lives, taking us deeper, refining us, and building us up to be mature and complete, lacking nothing. Third, where was Jesus when the disciples were struggling? Remember, he stayed behind. Even when we can't see Jesus, we must remember that he can see us. While the disciples battled the storm, Jesus was on the mountaintop praying. Do you know that he intercedes for us? From his elevated vantage point, it is highly likely that he saw them fighting the waves in that storm. So it is with us. Just because we can't see him doesn't mean he doesn't see us. And we can have confidence that he is working on our behalf. When we feel hopeless and don't think we can continue, he will show up. When we think it's all over and we want to give up, and we are weary beyond words, Jesus steps into the storm. He comes to us saying, "It is I. Don't be afraid." Even though the disciples toiled for hours, he came, just not on their timetable. Sometimes Jesus feels late to us, but his timing is always perfect. When I think about the lessons for my life and reflecting on my journey, I can see how God used deep waters to shape me. As a boy, I was afraid of drowning. I forgot that my big brother would never let that happen. Fear whispered to me, "What if I can't swim? What if I drown?" But I should have asked, what if today I learn how to swim? What if today I conquer my fear? Similarly, when I entered the Army, I was filled with doubts and regret. What if I fail? What if I'm not strong enough? What if I made the wrong choice? But God had a bigger plan. What if the Army was my destiny? What if losing my girlfriend made a way for the lifelong partner who would walk beside me in God's plan? This partner would help me become a better man, husband, father, and leader. And together, we would see God work in ways we never imagined. The Army took me from the kiddie pool of Claremont County to a world of opportunities I never dreamed of. It deepened my faith and set my feet on a new course. Maybe you're like the disciples, exhausted, rowing against the tide, feeling stuck and overwhelmed. You can't imagine going on for another hour, let alone another day. But hear this, even when you don't see Jesus, he sees you. God may not operate on your timetable, but he's always working. He promises to lead you out of the rut, to give you a new purpose, and to take you places you never thought possible. Look up and hear Jesus say, "Don't be afraid. It is I." He's with you in the storm. In due time, he will speak to the wind and the waves and tell them to quiet down. Until that moment, keep rowing, keep trusting, keep driving forward. He's got you, and he will guide you to the promised land. And even when we falter, he is still there. You may step out in faith and stumble like Peter, but Jesus is there with an outstretched hand, ready to lift you up. I have one final question. Are you stuck in the kiddie pool, clinging to the shallow and safe? Isn't it time to step out? Time to take the leap into the deep waters. Yes, there will be struggle, but in those depths, you'll discover growth, fulfillment, and the purpose you've been created for. It's in the deep that we find out who we truly are and where God proves he is with us. So take a breath, trust the one who calls you, and dive into the adventure he has prepared. Your greatest moments are still ahead of you. They're waiting for you to step out, just beyond the edge of fear. God bless you. I hope you've enjoyed listening to today's podcast. Would you take a moment and provide a rating, subscribe, and consider sharing this message of encouragement with others? You can also visit us on scottnuckles.com to get more information. Until next time, blessings.